homework 1?
Well, I had a question about double connected edge lists. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
What if you're given, let's say, a vertex? Like, you have like the data structure. What can you look up from it? If you're given like an edge, can you find all the vertices that it touches, and also like the face that it's part of, or like what can you look up from it?
From a vertex, there will be one edge that's leaving this vertex, even if it's adjacent to multiple edges, only one of them. And so I can go to this edge, and if it has a twin, I can find the twin. I can find one edge, and then I can find the twin of the edge. And from this edge, I can also find the face that it's adjacent to.
If you're getting the face, can you find the 3 vertices, or?
Not immediately. To find the 3 vertices, I need to do next. And if I'm on the outside face, there is one question that you don't have the outside face directly, and then you can go on the inner one.
Yeah. But so like if you're given the data structure, all your lookups are in constant time.
Yes,
Okay.
It's a big constant, which suggests that its data structure is really trading. Like sometimes you'll find that people store triangulation as every triangle knows what are the 3 vertices and the degrees that high and the exact geometry. It's just constant versus memory trade-off. Okay, plenty of cool things today. Let's continue with us moving it. Let's talk about the number of flips, and I remind you that's important. Make sure that you know it. In every triangulation, the average degree is 6. The average degree is 6, and it's actually, and that's important to one of the questions, it's slightly less than 6, which implies that in every triangulation there will be a vertex with degrees that is even less than 6. It's somehow important. But every triangulation you'll have one vertex, maybe more than one, but at least one will have a degree that is strictly less than 6. It's a huge hint for homework 2. By the way, somebody told me that they discovered homework 2 a bit late because I posted it in the wrong way. You're aware that there is homework 2, and I can always put extension if needed, but it's that you know. But
I was like, I just found out today in panic, so.
There was no email.
Dates are,
Just an announcement.
dates are, people, if you're not respecting deadlines, you're on to your 4th year. I'm not going to change it. So do your best to, we'll have an extension. If it seems that there is, obviously, that there will be an extension. So, so the number of flips, what are we taking from it? And so it's that what would be the degree of a vertex, and it's much easier to see it in the Voronoi diagram rather than in the Delanoy triangulation. Every vertex in our Delanoy algorithm starts its life, or the general case. A vertex starts its life by finding pi, find at which triangle it lives, need explanation how, connects to the 3 vertices on its side, and now check if these 3 edges or the 3 new edges are legal. That is, look at the pairwise triangle, that is, look at this triangle that I just created, does it contain anybody or not? I thought that it will be much simpler, but I am going down the way. Yeah, we start. Here's pi, look at pi start its life but by having degree 3. In the general case, it's unavoidable. If you are on an edge, then there could be some nuances. But if pi is not on an existing edge, no 3 points are collinear, say, then it is inside a triangle. By the way, I'll start all my points by adding p minus 1, p minus 2, p minus 3 as part of my input. So even when I start, I already have a triangle, so I don't need to worry about the inner point. I'm always inside an existing triangle, not inside a face open to infinity. Here is pi. It starts its life as having degree of 3, but then a new edge flip might occur, and this edge flip might add one of the edges to make it connect to pi. And why every edge flip will connect to the newcomer, I don't know to explain it on the Delanoy triangulation directly, but when you think about the Voronoi diagram, if I think about the Voronoi diagram, and I'll add yet another point somewhere, I'll add another point, then this new point in the Voronoi diagram will be connected, or this point, to whom is this connected? To all the faces that, or the sides that the faces that are neighboring to this new point. And that would be the Delanoy neighbors. So if I add pi somewhere to my Voronoi diagram, then at the end of the day, after all the flips, it will be connected to all its neighbors. Okay, so that's why every edge flip that will happen here will add one more neighbor to pi. And we went through the example, and we discussed, we went through this example, yada, 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 and we got to the conclusion that what is the average number of flips? What is the average number of flips? Well, what would be the average degree of a vertex? Well, the average here is look at all the vertices and assume, and now ask P1, what is your degree? P2, what is your degree? Without changing any of the points, you don't have any points. Without changing any of the points, look at the, not the Voronoi diagram, but the Delanoy triangulation. Look at the Delanoy triangulation. F, what is your degree? G, what is your degree? And so on. For each one, ask what's the degree, sum it up, and divide by the number of vertices. It's less than 6, which means that the average number of flips under this calculation is therefore less than 3. Like 3 edges you got to start, and then every edge flip increased your degree, but no matter at which order I inserted, and that's important. The order of insertions is definitely affecting the overall running time. We saw one order at which the number of edge flips was n cubed, was n squared, and we saw another order at which the number of edge flips was somehow much smaller. Go back to the previous slide, to the previous lecture. But after adding all the points, the Delanoy triangulation is the same. That's a shape that I'll get independent of the order. So now, playing with this backward analysis, which is absolutely ingenious idea that I wish that would be mine, but is not, that really made a revolution. Assuming that I put all the points, and now I pick one at random and I remove it. How many edges are connected on average to the point that I remove? Answer, about 6 on average, because it is the average, right? So, given that I insert the point at a random order, each one of the steps suggests only 6 new edges, which implies only 3 new edge flip on average. Cool with everybody? Let's talk about the data structure. So just summing up the running time altogether. So the running time includes the point location, how for every new I'm inserting the points one after the other. I need to find that this line for each point, at which triangle it sits, but without these points, the running time is on average linear, because every point on average creates 6 new events, 3 new edges plus 3 edge flips. But it's on the expected running time, meaning I have my data set, I take the very same points, take a random permutation, insert them. How many edge flips do I have throughout the whole algorithm? Take the very same point again, take a random permutation, reinsert again. How many edge flips? And so on and so forth. Do it 10 billion times for the same input. What is the ever expected number of edge flips out of all the trials that you have? On the answer, linear, roughly 6, like really nice constant. Anybody figured out the relationship between these gizmos and car racing?
It's a rotary shape.
Okay, that's cool. And the relationship to car racing?
The diameter anywhere is the same. So, or like if you choose like the maximum.
Car racing.
The maximum radius at all points is always.
Car racing. Car racing. Cars are going on an oval and try to get first place. Let's see, I don't want to get anything embarrassing, so I'll do it on my first. It was such a great success. It went had plus and minuses, but rotary engine, the idea is that this shape looks like intersection of 3 circles. This shape is rotary and it doesn't need any valves, and it's you need timing, but you don't need any valves here, and you'll see the animation, and you can get very small weight of the engine and very large power. But it also not easier to keep air conditioned because it burns oil, etc., etc. But yeah, rotary engine, and the idea is that it's based on this shape. Okay, so and it was tried in motorcycles. As far as I know, there are. Every once in a while, people try to introduce it as an engine, but the only place that it's really solid usage are at UAVs, because it works for many hours, and it's extremely light because there is very little mechanical fix out of it. Data structure. So the data structure, once again, it has 2 lives. It has a life as the algorithm goes, as I insert points. I need to find out what is a triangle, and triangles keep changing, but I need to find out for a new point Pi at which triangle it lives. And then eventually, once I'm done with the triangulation, I want to be able to use this triangulation for some application, graphics application, something. And I'll have a lot of ray tracing or to do point location with this. The same triangulation, and I can use the same data structure, and it's a very good data structure. So the idea is that we avoid anything that you know for balanced trees, like rotation in the tree. Avoid it completely. Our tree are only going by building down elements. No rotation. It will be just the equivalent to do so I want to insert all these keys into a search tree. So I'm going to keep all these keys in a search tree, but I'm going to avoid any balancing operation. So let's insert them. 10 and 20, now I'm inserting 30, starting from the root of the tree. 30 is larger than 10, larger than 20, 30, 40, 50. So I'm inserting all these keys. Here is possibly the tree, and I keep inserting trees. And it doesn't look like a particularly good search tree. But I argue that this is just a one-dimensional analogous to what's going on here, and I still think that I'll get pretty good trees. Help? It's a one-dimensional analogous of I have a set of keys, I insert them into a tree, I don't do any rotation, don't do any AVL white-black stuff that you know, no node splitting and merging like in 2, 3, and B trees. And still I expect a nice tree. Why? In this example.
Is the input random?
The keys are the same, but it's random permutation of the input, which is very similar to what happened in quicksort. Here I insert them, but I picked the worst or one of the worst permutations that I could have, that it go all the way up. This cries out, this is a very mean constructed permutation. I would think that a permutation that looks like 20, 30, and maybe 30. So I'm getting into troubles. Yeah, I'll argue that 40, 30, 50, and who do I have? 40. I have two 40s, but random permutation is very unlikely, and I can prove it in algorithms. Don't watch what I taught you. The grad algorithms prove that actually, if you are taking a random permutation, the height of the tree is only log n, or only ln n. Or quicksort will take only n ln n on average, because the same argumentation works. It's a random permutation. Which means what? What do I get by the random permutation for the keys? That the key that I picked as the root of the tree is unlikely to be the smallest, or in the top, in the smallest 10%, and it's unlikely to be in the largest 10%. It's much more likely, 4 times more likely, that the keys that I'll pick to start with will be in the middle 80%, not in the smallest 10%, not in the largest 10%. So what? It will mean that in this tree, I will have, no matter where is the root, I will have at least 10% on the left and at least 10% on the right, more like 90, 80. But that's much more likely than getting less than this portion. And if it's true for most nodes of the tree, then the height of the tree is log n, log to the base 1 of n. It's not log to the base 2, but it's log to the base of 90 to 10% to 9. which is about log of 1.1. Log to the base 1.1, which is about 8 times more than log to the base 2. So that's the intuition. Everything is in the random permutation. Back here. So I'm not going to do any rotation. I'll start with one big triangle, delta, and now I'm inserting a point into this triangle. Pi was inserted, and let's just think about what Pi does. And my tree, when I started, so going back, when I started, this triangle delta is the root of my tree. That's the root of my tree, but it's also the only leaf. That's the whole tree, just delta. And now I'm inserting Pi, and Pi is connected to the 3 vertices, and it creates 3 new triangles, delta 1, delta 2, delta 3. Meaning that instead of delta, that in a sense died right now, but it stays as a node, still alive in some parallel world. Delta is still alive, but it has 3 children, delta 1, delta 2, delta 3. And that's before I even start doing the edge flipping. So that would be my data structure right now. And it's nice. And if you don't care about the Delanoy property, it's absolutely fine as a data structure by itself. Now you're adding a new point somewhere inside a triangle. Then this triangle will have 3 children as well. And random permutation will work just as pretty. It will not be a Delanoy triangulation, but it will be a good data structure to find yourself inside a triangulation. Okay? Just because it's power of random permutation. So again, every time that you have a point inside a leaf, this point partitions this leaf triangle into 3 triangles, meaning that this triangle stops, this node stops being a leaf, it becomes an internal node, and it has 3 children. Now, let's think about edge flipping. So what is the story of edge flipping? I had Pi, and possibly it's Pi over here. Possibly there is a whole process cascading of edge flipping. I asked in the examples. It could be that I add one point and it caused n edge flipping. Quite possible. Here is one example of edge flip. So you have 2 triangles, delta 1, delta 2. Here they are. I look at the smallest enclosing circle. I'm asking if this edge is legit. Remember, a legit meaning that the smallest enclosing circle through 3 points as defined by this triangle does not contain this point. In this case, it definitely contains. So edge flip must happen. And that's where my data structure stops being a tree and starts being a DAG. DAG, directed acyclic graph. The order is completely clear, except that one node might have more than one parent. How could it be? Delta 1 and delta 2 stopped being internal nodes. They are still in the tree, but they stopped being leaves, and instead they are going to have children. Who are their children? After the edge flip, hello? After the edge flip, I have 2 new triangles, and they might be very short-living. It might be that more edge flips will cause these triangles to die immediately in the same process. Never mind. So delta 1, delta 2 stop existing in my triangulation. Instead, I have 2 other triangles after the edge flip, delta 1 prime and delta 2 prime. So delta 1 now will point to both delta 1 prime and delta 2 prime, and the same goes for delta 2, points to both of them. So what is the rule? Well, the rule says that U points to V U points to V if and only if triangle of U and intersect, has a non-empty intersection with a triangle of V. Okay? So now, assume that I have an oracle that can tell me you have a point pi and you have a triangle. Is the point pi is inside the triangle or not? Again, I have a point pi, Q, and I have a triangle, and my oracle tells me is Q inside the triangle or not inside the triangle. How can I find which triangle of the triangulation contains Q? It's kind of similar to the searching in normal tree, but what do I do? I check if Q, my point, lies inside delta. If it's not inside delta, it's not in my triangulation, ignore it. If it's inside delta, then now check all three children, delta 1, delta 2, and delta 3, to ask if Q is inside this point. And if this point is a leaf, then you're done. If it's not a leaf, it's internal, then check out of the possible children, 2 in this case, or 3 in this case, which one of your children contains Q, and so on. And you're going down the recursion. Yeah?
How do you store the triangles?
3 vertices, I guess. I can be more economical, I guess, but at this point, 3 vertices. Or to be more robust, I'll have an array of long floats of each vertex with all its properties. And now the triangle would be just the index of this point. That's actually the correct answer. So good question. So the whole vertex stored only once, and triangle just stored indices, I, J, K.
When you're finished with creating this graph, can you convert it into a DCL easily, or is it going to be pretty costly?
Depending on the application, I think that, well, I know for every, I'll have to think about it. I'll argue that for application, I think that, I don't know, need to think. Okay, so, of course, we said that there might be plenty of edge flips, so the height could be n squared. Oh, the height cannot be n squared, but the height can be n, because I have one flip, to create a chain of n vertices, but it's not very likely. Again, why? Random permutation, because the number of edge flips, power of expectation, and I'm cutting many corners. Power of expectation. Expectation of sum is sum of expectation, each individual event. I don't care how these events are respected. Number of edge flip when I have 1 point is 1. Number of, actually, that's a probability of that I'm visiting one of the triangles. And cutting more corners here, so need to double think about the explanation. At the I step, you're asking for a point pi, in how many, I know that there are I triangles. At the I step, there are order I triangles, but for point pi, what is probability to be part of one of these triangles? On average, if there are I triangles, on average, a point contra the constant number of triangles, probability is 1 over I. So if I start from the root and going down, how many nodes will I have to visit until I get to a leaf? Takes more math, but that's the number of nodes that I need to spend after inserting 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, all the way up to n points. 1 over I is a number of such triangles. And this sum is a name. That's a harmonic sum. And it equals to pretty much ln I after I triangle, or ln n after n points are inserted. That's the average query time that you have. very close to log to the base 2, very close to the optimum, and that's without any balancing, and that's really why this algorithm is in practice so fast. So hopefully my hand wave was enough to understand roughly. I'm not saying that's the height of the tree. It's actually true. I can prove that with high probability that's the height of the tree, but that's not the first claim. The first claim is take any one of your points, Pi, and ask, as you are going from the root to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, until you're reaching a leaf, what your expected number of nodes that you'll have to visit? That's the answer, which is great. Okay, so we are done with the Delanoy algorithms, going to the many applications that it has. Okay, so on average, everything is on average, but yeah, it's good. Again, the space could be quadratic, and if you go enough many slides to this case, that's the case that it could be quadratic. You might have the homework that relates to it, but it's again all in the mercy of your permutation. Okay, we talked about Voronoi diagram in 2 dimensions. It could be n cube. Let's see related topics, like this Voronoi diagram business has a lot to do with shape analysis, which has a lot to do with studying shape, comparing libraries of shapes, and that's what I would say about neural network. And I'd say, yes, neural network would like you to preprocess your shape if you could. It will be more efficient in some cases. Big argument. In short, I want a library of shapes, and I want to know what is the essence of the shape. What is the essence of the dog? What is the skeleton of the dog? So let's define the skeleton and the medial axis. So I want to say that the skeleton of this shape, skeleton of S, consists of all the points P inside the shape. The shape consists of all the meat in the inner. It's not only the skin. All the shapes that has at least one point's nearest neighbor on the boundary of the shape. So for every point, I look at the nearest neighbor on the boundary, the skin of the shape, and I want to identify points that have more than a single nearest neighbor. So where my finger is, it has one nearest neighbor. Let's think about the dog, or let's think about a rectangle. What would be its medial axis? This point, P over here, is not on the medial axis, not on the skeleton, because its nearest neighbor is just this point over here. But if I look at the diagonal, a point on the diagonal, look at its nearest neighbors. It has one nearest neighbor, another nearest neighbor right here, 2 nearest neighbors. So the diagonal is part of the skeleton. And the skeleton of this rectangle would be, roughly speaking, what you see over here, very inaccurately, or what you see over here. All the points of this part of the dog has the nearest neighbor over here, nearest neighbor over here. Okay, so that's the skeleton, and sometimes it's good thing, like character recognition, older technology, would be nice to just compare skeletons of letters to skeletons of other letters, because a lot of the information is there. Sometimes you want to clean some of the noise, sometimes it's good to work on it by itself. You see that here there is a hole, so the skeleton has 2 points on it. Bunch of points that argue why the skeleton is. Okay, so plenty of applications right here, but I want to move even further. So let's do surface reconstruction. The Stanford bunny, I sampled points on the skin on the Stanford bunny, say by a 3D laser scanner, and now I want to reconstruct the shape. And I want to ask, can I do it reliably or not? And reliably can mean a few things. Reliably can mean that geometrically the shape, the surface, the skin that I'll reconstruct is close to the original shape, but it can also mean topologically you are correct. Huh? These are points that I sampled. Is this one shape, like so, that is connected? Is no connection and then the shape is closed? That's topological question. What are the connected components? Right. Are you reconstructing it correct in terms of, are you creating holes in the shape? Think about a torus. Are you creating a hole where a hole was not enough? And there is not necessarily one clear answer. You did it, it's sampled enough or not. As a rule, the more sample points that I have, and it's sample, so I'm talking about sample points. That's a shape that I exist in 3D. I used my 3D laser pointer to laser scanner to sample points on its boundary. And now I try to reconstruct the 3D, 2D skin around them. Can I do it reliably? Is it actually similar to the shape, or did I disconnect it to 3 separate pieces? Well, depending. If I have lots and lots of sample points, probably I can do it more reliably. I still need an algorithm for it. If my points are sparse, then probably it's more tricky. But now let's think about we double do it. So here is my shape, and my first attempt to give you a criteria about did you sample enough would be, I'll say let's measure this distance, let's call it 1 inch or 1 foot, I don't know what is symbol, if one tag distance and then 1 tag distance. I'll place a point, this distance, help, 1 centimeters apart from each other, or simpler, I don't know how you're. Is this a good criteria or not a good criteria? It's 1 centimeter. And the answer is that probably it's not, because 1 centimeter here will miss all this part. But 1 centimeter is perfectly fine for the other portion. So it needs to be somehow sensitive. And it actually should be somehow related to something like
the angle.
The fact that there is a sharp angle here is definitely important, but I know what you mean. It's not the angle, it's a curvature.
Yeah.
It's how much angle does it change per 1 centimeter that you're walking, which starts to be related. Are you turning, if you're moving in constant velocity, are you turning very sharply, which is related, definitely. But, and that's very much is analogous to middle axis and skeleton are quite related. Middle axis can also be outside. I'm not sure what is the middle axis. I'll just say it's discrete set of points that have in my sample points 2 neighbors. These are in the middle axis. Very similar to skeleton. Don't confuse. You can definitely use the same term. Okay, points out of, because all I have are the sample points I'm carrying for points that have 2 neighbors that I think that are on the boundary. You can ignore this part. Back to my sampling question. You know about Shannon theorem, right? That if you have a signal consists of sinuses, then you need to sample it in a frequency that it's like twice how much it's changing by itself. That's roughly said that if it changes by itself very slowly, then maybe you don't need to sample it frequently. If you change very fast, you do need to. And which brings us to a term that is definitely related to the curvature, which is the local feature size. Here's a point on the boundary. Here's a medial axis. This point on the boundary has its local feature size, which is just a distance to the nearest point of the medial axis. We start. On medial axis, like the skeleton, the middle of the shape, a point on the boundary, and I want to define the local feature size, LFS, of this point P. What is this? How far away, how much should I walk to go from the red point to the nearest point of the medial axis? Let's play with it over here. The medial axis in this shape, completely hand there. Waving would be, I guess that here I'm somewhere in the middle of this big blob, and somewhere over here, which suggests that from this shape, the distance to the local, my distance to the medial axis, D1, is huge, comparing to, so that was P1 and that was D1 versus P2 that just needs to walk a distance of D2, much smaller. And that suggests that this local feature size should be somehow proportional. Maybe what I need to use is, instead of 1 centimeter, let's decide that for every point on the boundary, I'll check. Of course, I don't know the boundary, so I check and there. But if I know the boundary for a moment, you just let me know what is the local feature size, and I'll decide that don't walk 1 centimeter, walk 1 centimeter times your distance to the local feature size, and that sounds reasonable. So we'll say, you gave me epsilon. Epsilon, we'll see that epsilon equal 0.3 works actually very well in practice. And I'll say that my original shape is epsilon sampled, or good sample, if each point on the original boundary will find a point. There is a better slide coming. Each point on the original boundary, what is its distance to the nearest sampled point? Q is not a point on my already sampled point, but it should be that close enough to with respect to no more than epsilon times the distance to the local feature size, you should find a sampled point. Don't walk away a big distance on the shape without having a sample point, but big distance now depends on the local feature size. Another example from P, here is a skeleton. Why is this a skeleton? Once again, because every point on the skeleton on the medial axis has one nearest neighbor on the boundary, another nearest neighbor on the boundary. So the local feature size changes as you walk along the boundary. And I want local feature size is your distance to the nearest point on the medial axis. And I want to give you the feeling that the medial axis is somehow related to the Voronoi diagram. Well, one thing is that we are studying Voronoi diagram, that's why. More of it, think about it. If this point is on the medial axis, it means it has 2 data points that I sampled which are equal distance. So fine, it's I have some noise here, so it's not exactly that the vertices because various noise, and it's not exactly, but you see that the vertices and edges of the Voronoi diagram are somehow formed very nicely, the medial axis. Why? They are, look at the Voronoi diagram of these shapes, that's a Voronoi diagram, right? So it means, in particular, pieces of the Voronoi diagram are defined there because they are equidistant. What do I mean by edges of Voronoi diagram? Equidistant from two data points. Okay, so, and we'll say that a shape is good sampled if every point on the boundary has at least one sample point at distance of the local feature size times epsilon. For example, local feature size times 1/3. Then it's good sample. And then we are getting to the Quast algorithm, which I think is the coolest in this course. So I'll just introduce it now, but I actually did it, but let's see it once again. Now when we understand much further, it was my candidate for the, we had in computational geometry the test of time, what was the most influential 20 years after. Here are my data points. I have a slider that allows me to move these two shapes closer or further away. Do I know what is a topology? Do I know what is a skin? Not exactly. The skin, some pieces of it I definitely can guesstimate the skin based on the sampling, but is this one shape or two shapes or something with holes? I have no clue. I want to make sure that what I'll get at the end will be a bunch of edges that forms a polygon or a few polygons, and each one should not miss edges. You shouldn't have holes, and it should be closed, and it should be a simple polygon. You shouldn't get, for obvious reasons, you don't want this as the skin of a polygon. So what Amenta, Bern, and Epstein suggested was start from the Delanoy triangulation of the shape. Here are all the Delanoy edges. They suggest something about vicinity, but by themselves, you see them by themselves. You don't see the Delanoy, but also because of the projector, but that's fine. There is too many edges, and they are connecting lots of points to every other point. Here is the actual medial axis, if I would know it, if I would know the shape. That's part of the medial axis, another part of the medial axis. But I don't know it. Here is a Voronoi diagram of all the data points. Looks a bit noisy, but look at least subset of the Delanoy edge, subset of the Voronoi edges are just nicely in the middle of the shape. Why are they important? Because I actually want to use Delanoy edges, but I have way too many Delanoy edges. Give me 3 more minutes, okay, everybody? 3 more minutes. Delanoy edges, when I run them, some of them are edges that I want, like every point in Y, every point will be connected to its nearest neighbor. The Voronoi cells are close to each other. But I also have Delanoy edges that connected different pieces of the shape to the other shape, or one point of the shape to a different point of the shape, but way inside the shape. So what do I want to do? I want to use Delanoy edges to filter other Delanoy edges. I want to use this Voronoi that I created to filter out wrong Delanoy edges. So here is a Voronoi diagram. By the way, it's all 3 lines in GeoGebra. So here are the Voronoi edges. Let's look at all the vertices of the Voronoi. So I removed all the edges of the Voronoi. I'm just left with the vertices of the Voronoi. And now I take the Delanoy triangulation, but Delanoy triangulation of what? It's Delanoy triangulation of the points that are either of the data union with the vertices of the Voronoi diagram. total mass, you have an access to it, so do play with this. So what did I get by adding the Voronoi diagram? That now a Delanoy edge that connected to, remember this was my piece of the shape, Delanoy edge that was connected to further away points, they got a Voronoi vertex just in the middle. So these 2 points are not are not connected anymore because now there is a Voronoi vertex in the middle. So my hands are connected to my torso instead of connecting to one arm to the other. So that's look like a total noise. But now let's remove out of all the Delanoy edges. I check for each and every Delanoy edge. Remember, it's Delanoy edges of the switcher set. Delanoy triangulation of all the data points plus all the Voronoi vertices. So I have this rich set. Now, for every Delanoy edge, I check, hey, are your 2 endpoints, are they belong to the original data, or do they belong to points of 1 data plus 1 Voronoi vertex that I created? So I'll remove all the edges that are not belonging to, that don't have, all the new Delanoy edges that didn't have both endpoints as data points, and that's what I'm getting at the end. And it's correct geometry-wise, and it's correct topology. I'm getting these 2 shapes. Now, if these 2 shapes will be very close to each other, then at some point bad things will happen. Like at this point, it's not anymore polygons. It's not closed. It's not. But as long as, and I need to convince you that as long as my sampling was close enough to the local feature size, then this algorithm is guaranteed to topologically give you the right answer. It will be closed curves, and geometry. These edges are very close, epsilon close to the original boundary of the shape. So it's a great algorithm. Very good. Thank you.